Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll set this Bava Batra daf Kuf Lamed Tes. We are going to begin on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Chesamid Beis by the Mishnah. Ha'av Toilish U'Meichel. So in this, the Rashbam says that this Mishnah goes back on a Koisev Nechasav of Noi. Person wrote his possession to his son. Le'achar So as we said, that in that case, the Aknali Gufa Mahayoim Uperu Achamisa. What happens is that the son has rights to the land, however, the father keeps the fruit the entire time. The Hilkoch Machal Av B'chayev Perus Shatolish L'chomish Yirtzeh. Therefore, if you have any of these fruits that are detached during the father's lifetime, certainly he has a right to do whatever he wants, the father. However, whatever was attached to the ground when the father died, even if it was about to be detached, it automatically goes to the son, as he was a Makabel Matana. This is only by the son, says the Rashbam. We're going to see this in Gemara. That if you've done the same thing to some stranger, we would say that even the things that are attached to the ground at the time of the death do not go to the acher, but to the yorshim. The Gemara is going to say this, that this is the distinction that we make between a child and acher. Let's look at the Mishnah. So, since the father has rights to the fruits, again, he's allowed to eat these fruits. The only things that are tolush at the time of the father's death belong to the yorshim, because since it was detached from the ground, that's peros that the father already had ownership of. However, anything which is mechuber belongs to the son. Says the Gemara, tolush in mechuber lo. Again, anything which is attached to the ground, not, as we continue to Kuf Lamed Tes with Alf. Vatanya, but we learned elsewhere in Tosefta and Ksuvas, there's Shomenes ha-mechubarin, well-lekeach, that we evaluate that which is attached to go to the buyer. Says the Rashbam, Machar haben, let's say the son sells something, Umesa av, and the father dies. So, im yesh mechasim mechubarim lekarkos, if there's nechasim which are attached to the ground, shaman lo, then we evaluate it. So, how could you tell me that that which is attached goes to the son? We see over here that that which is attached does not automatically go to the acher. So, how do we understand this? So, it depends who we're talking about. Our Mishnah is obviously talking about a son. Because you have a closer relationship with your son than on some stranger. Says the Rashbam, not to someone else, as we explain later on. Also, what we said before in the Mishnah, the Rashbam said that when it comes to the son, anything that's attached goes to him. However, when it comes to an acher, even things which are mechuber to the karka, b'shas misa does not go to the acher. Rather, we have to evaluate it. And therefore, the point is that it's not automatically belonging to the buyer. So therefore, we evaluate it, and therefore it's not part of what the buyer would get, because the acher doesn't have the same relationship. So that's the difference between the father giving to a son, father giving to an acher. Next masnisa. Okay. Just make sure there's no question over here. Okay. No questions. So let's now see the next Mishnah. Says the Masnisa, Haniach banim gedolim ukatanim. Let's say a person leaves sons, older sons, pre-bar mitzvah sons, and nothing is written down, none of his nechasim are written down. So, Eina gedolim misparnesim al yedei akatanim, So we say that everything has to be divided equally. We don't say that one can get garments or that the young one can get mizono, says Rashbam. The truth is, to sustain an older person, it costs more money than someone who's younger. Now, when it comes to parnasa, to actually sustain them with clothing, and these expenses are more expensive. However, when it comes to food, little children need to eat more to, gain strength. So therefore, we don't say that the older ones could take, before it's divided, their expenses, or the katanim could take their mizonos, because then it wouldn't be proportional, and therefore instead they have to divide everything equal. Now nasa hagadolim, let's say the Rashbam says noshim, let's say afterwards these older boys got married. We also sarchitsu the chuppah mit tfusas abayis. Before everything was divided, they took a portion of this massive pot of money, which was again pre-divided, and they used it for their wedding expenses. So the din is yisu gam katanim kamokin kodim chaluka. So yisu katanim, the younger ones could do the same thing, because maybe they shouldn't. The gedolim shouldn't have done it, but it doesn't matter. They did it. So therefore, since they took advantage, so then the katanim should have the same privilege. V'im omer katanim hari anu noisim kedech she nasasim atem. So what happens if, let's say, the Gedolim were married off and the father did pay for them, but it was because the father was alive? So the father was alive, that's different. So the fact that your older brothers got married and your father paid off the expenses, now that the father died, we're not going to listen to you and say, oh, now the expenses should be paid as well. We're not going to listen to it. What the father gave in their lifetime, it was gifted. It was part of what the father did. He paid for the wedding expenses. But now we're dealing with inheritance. That's not part of it, and therefore it's still divided equally, even though you still now have wedding expenses now. And then a similar case, haniach banos gedolos ukatanos. Let's say you have older daughters. You don't have any sons. You just have older daughters and younger daughters. It's exactly the same thing. We divide everything up equally. Let's say the older girls got married and they paid for part of the wedding expenses after the father had died, and they took, again, this money. So Yisu Katanos, the younger girls could do the same. However, let's say the older girls were married in the lifetime of their father. V'im Omer Katanos Hari Anu Noisos Kadech Shin Sasim Atem. Then in Shaimin Lehem, again, we don't listen in Shaimin Lehem, because again, what the father gave. Okay. The Mishnah doesn't say the same thing. El will masha nasan lehem avia nasan. Okay. Zeh chaymer bebanos mibebanim. There's one difference between sons and daughters, even though the Mishnah seems to be almost identical. Shabanos nizainis al habanim ve'nizainis al habanis. That when it comes to after the death of the father, so there's an obligation that the girls should receive mizonos. That's only if they're sons, because the sons inherit the Yerusha. And since they get the Yerusha, part of that is to be allocated to their sisters for their mizonos expenses. However, if there's no sons, there's only daughters, so then it's just out straight up Yerusha, and therefore there's no mizonos. They just live off of whatever they have. That's the idea behind that. Okay, let's see the Gemara. Amar Rava. So, hi Godol Achi Dolavash. Let's say you have this older brother that got all dressed up, and he's like dressing nicely. Actually, what he did was okay. In other words, even though he took monies, says Rashbam, it's okay, even though normally we said you're not supposed to take money for parnasa or for clothing expenses before it's divvied up, but this older brother, he has the responsibility to look properly in engaging in these business practices. So in order for them to be able to be taken seriously, so he needs to get a nice suit, etc. So that should come off the top, and it's not like part of his allotment. So people should listen to him. So if you wear nice clothes, people are more willing to listen to you. And therefore, what he did was done. I thought you don't do that. Masnisin, our Mishnah is b'shircha. I'm talking about an idle person. Says Rashbam, Adam batal shein lahem revach badaber. There's no reason why he has to wear a nice suit to impress people. He just wants to have some nice clothes. That's what our Mishnah is talking about. That it's not part of that we will not allow that. However, when it comes to shircha, that's shircha. However, our case where it's allowed is where he actually has a purpose for the benefit of the family. You still think maybe it's good that he doesn't look repulsive? Doesn't matter. We don't count that. Nasu gedolim yisu katanim. So my karma, so Rav Yehuda, as we said, hachakamer. Nasu gedolim achamisa savin. If let's say already after the father's death, that's when they got married, and therefore they took expenses off. So then the yisu katanim liachamisa savin. So then the younger boys could do the same. But let's say the father was alive and paid for the wedding, and then after the misa of the father, the katanim want the same treatment. There we don't listen, because again, this is a big difference. One was your father was alive, now your father's not alive. So Shalchi Avua Bar Geniva Rava, he sent the following message to Rava. Lamdenu Rabbeinu, we learned the following. What happens if you have a woman who borrowed money, consumed it, and now she gets married? It says Rashbam, V'amda v'nises, v'echnisa kol nechaseha labala k'derech nesua. So basically, all of her possessions go to her husband in the normal way of marriage. So, Baal kechavi o yorish havi. So since the wife, before she was married, she had expenses. So now the question is, now that they got married, what's the status of the husband? Is he like the status of like a buyer or of an inheritor? So, Lokechavi, is he like a buyer, and therefore, Umilval Pe Enu Goivim in Lukuchais, because this is an undocumented debt regarding his wife, so therefore the Lukuchos cannot come after the husband. Odilma Yorishavi, it's like he inherited Umilval Pe Goivim in a Yarshim. You could collect from Yorshim even a Milval Pe like this. So the question basically is, can you collect from the husband? Says the Rashbam. Does the husband have the status of a buyer? Okay. So we're going to see a lot of other practical nafkaminas, but we just basically established one. So Amrle Tanina, we already learned this. This is Nisu Gedolos, Nisu Katanos. So it said that the older girls got married off, so the younger ones could do the same thing and use the same expenses. So my love, Nisu Gedolos, Libal, Nisu Katanos, Mibal. So I have to see the difference between Libal and Mibal. The older daughters got married to a husband. And then, because of that, the younger daughters may get married Mibal. What does that mean? Says Rashbam. From the husband. Chelkam Hamagiyam Al Miyarishabi. This money is owed to the other daughters. So we see that actually it's like a Yarish. In other words, you should be able to take it Mibal, from her husband. In other words, the fact is that he's like a Yarish, and it's like they borrowed money from the estate in order to get married, right? So since that was done, so now they also have a right to do the same thing, to be able to take lo nisu gedolos libal, nisu katanos libal. So it changes to a lam. What does that mean? It means memomen avihin hamunach, because they never actually took the money. It's still in this big pot. We're not connected the money that the older one took. It's not that, basically, as we said, if there's this big pot of money and none of it has been divided up. It's not that it was divided up and therefore the older one took something and therefore the Katanim have a right to take that money back from her, from the Gedola, because it wasn't divided properly, because now I want to get married, so therefore your husband has to pay, husband of the older one has to pay for the wedding of the younger one. No, that's not what we're talking about, where the monies were just never taken out of the pot. That's what we're talking about. That's not the case. From the husband. So again, that's a ride, that's a Yarish Havi. No, Dilmashani Parnasa the Isla Kala. It could be different. We're not talking about wedding expenses, but we're talking about Parnasa, where there's a voice. This is Rashbam. The Shani Parnasas Nesuin the Isla Kala. Ukemilva Bishtar Damya. This doesn't have the status of a Milva al Peh, it's a Milva Bishtar. Hilkach Treifam and Mishabadi Moitzina Film Yadal Kuchais. So therefore you could actually take it from Lukuchais. So the only time we say that the Nafgamina is only by a Milva al Peh. But it has the status, because it's a coal, it has the status of a milva b'shtar. Amar Rav Papul Rav Lav Hainu Deshalach Rabin Bi Garte, wasn't it sent in the following letter, that we're going to see that he answers that he's a Yarish. Mishamei, someone who died, V'hiniach almana ubas, and this person left a wife who, again, he died, so his wife is alone, and he also left a daughter. She's an orphan. So so we say that your widow, your wife, can collect from your possessions. Says the Rashbam, but tonight ksubasa, because that's actually what's in the ksuba. Shekach kasava v'atehei yasva b'veis. I'll stay in my house. It means you can stay in my house. It means I'm nechasai. You give me zonis for my nechasim. Kol yimei megar armonoseich, as long as you're an almana. So it's actually in the ksuba that even after I die, you are able to collect. So that's part of the ksuba. So it says nisei sabas. Let's say the daughter, who is actually the Yarish, gets married. So almana nizanis v'nechasav. So now the almana will, because everything was transferred over to the daughter, because she was the inheritor, so therefore everything goes to the daughter, but now still the daughter has to provide for this woman, the almana. Mesa habas, what happens when the daughter dies? Now who gets the money? Does her husband get it? Let's see. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda ben Achaisa shel Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina alidei hayamai. So this taka happened. V'yamar almanason is zaynis v'nechasav. We say that the almana still gets paid, but from the son-in-law. So what happened? So the almana was getting mezainis from the daughter. The daughter died, but she was married. So now her husband gets all the stuff. So the almana doesn't lose out. She still is able to collect, but now it's from the son-in-law. Now, if you want to tell me that the status of a husband when it comes to obligations is like a Yarish, so Mishum Hachi Amanasan is Zedes Menachasav. That's the reason why she can still collect from the son-in-law. Why would we say that she's able to collect from his possessions if it's only again she would have the status of a Leikech? So it's obviously a raya that the fact that she could still collect her Nizainis Menachasav from the son-in-law, it must be a raya that he has the status of a Yarish, and that's what we said. A Yarish, just like when it comes to a Milva Peh, Gavrim and a Yarshim. So that's how we're understanding this. If we look in the Rashbam, Ein Moitzin Lemazin Ha'ishim Abanas Menachasim Mishumadim Im Netikan Oilam. So if these are okay, fine. So Omer Abaya, you love the Shalach Ravin. If it wasn't for this message, Anan Lo Yadinan, we wouldn't know this. Like, we know this anyway. Like, this is obvious. We know that this is the din that she can collect. But Tanan, we learned elsewhere. We also learned in Masechtas B'chaynis, Elohein Shein Chayzin B'Yovel. These are the individuals that will not go back to Yovel, says Rashbam. Lebalehen Shein Chayzin Ela Mimecher. it only goes back through a sale. So one of them is habachira, the portion of the bechoros of the bechor. Why? Because as we saw before, when it comes to a din of a bechor, the pishnayim is considered a matana. It says Rashbam, matana kuri rachmana lases lo pishnayim. So since it's a gift, so therefore the din is a mecher is not the same as matana. So therefore matana is not going to be chayzer b'yovel. That's the first thing. Okay, so habachira, as we continue to kuf lam testament base, and here's the key one: v'hayorish es ishtoi. It says beferish that yorish es ishto, and it says the Rashbam, v'ilo kechavi. If let's say the husband was considered to be the buyer, mishashinises, when he marries this woman, so lafil lachar misa, even after she dies, lo nafka muchla mekach o memchar v'tehad b'yovel. So again, obviously he doesn't have the status of a lokeach, because if he had the status of a lokeach, then like all forms of purchases, it goes back on yovel. So the fact is that since it does not go back on yovel, obviously it's because it does not have the status of a lokeach. Obviously it has the status of a yorish. So we see this in other cases that's the din. So Amruli Rava v'hashta deshach miyadina. Now the sentence, is it so clear? Oh, so for sure the husband is like the status of a yorish, right? Clear. Not so clear. After all, otherwise miyadina, would we really know this? After all, ha'im Rav Yosef Rav Chanina ba'usha hiskinu, when the Sanhedrin was exiled, as it brings down the Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, hiskinu ha'isha shamachor nixim elug b'chai ba'ala, that they made a din that if a woman sells her nixim elug, which the nixim elug are not written into the ksuba, and typically what happens is the husband has the right to eat the fruits, she has the rights to the land, and then she sells it b'chai ba'ala while the husband's still alive, and again the husband really has rights to the land, to the fruit, umesa, then she dies, so the husband has a right to take the land back. So what does that mean? Says the Rashbam, Shim Yomos Bawa, if her husband, if let's say he dies, Yizak Behen, Vim Tomos he, it's a deal that I'm going to sell this to you. The woman sells it and says, listen, if my husband dies while I'm still alive, then it's a permanent sale. However, im Tomos he, but if she dies, v'yir shabal yafsidu, you would think that what should happen is that they would lose out. However, that's not what happens. Instead, the husband is able to collect it back when his wife dies. Now, how is that possible? It must be that it has the status of a lokeach. Says the Rashbam. Okay, so fine. So Rabbanan, I think this is part of this Rashba. The Gemara doesn't say this, but it must be that it is considered to be a lokeach. Why? That the Rabbanan consider like Mishash Nasa, the time that he got married to this woman, Mishum Hachi Mapik Lokeach Rishanabi. So therefore he is like the din of the first buyer, the husband, and therefore he has a right to take it back. If he's just an inheritor, Mishas Nesu in the time of the marriage, my Mapik Lama Tiknu Ba'usha Shabal Maitzi. How could it be that they established that the husband could take it back? Well, Isha she Moreshes Oso Machra. Vein Koyach Biyarshin Liyarish Mashamachra Vian. Elavadai Mitikinu Habal Maitzi Kach Haya Iker Tekanas Usha Shehabal Lekeach Menechse Menechase Mishashanasa. He's considered like the first buyer. He was the original buyer, so therefore he's able to get it back. Okay, again, he was the original buyer, he had rights to the fruits, so now that she died, he has a right to take it back. Must be because he's considered to be like a lekeach. If it was like a yarish, well, that's it, he loses it. So which one is this? The husband like a buyer, or is the husband like a yarish? The answer is, it depends. It depends, because it could be on certain circumstances. And the Rabbanan specifically considered the Baal sometimes like a Baal. A Baal could be like a Yarish, whatever's in his best interest. So they did whatever was best for the husband. What does that mean? So Gabi Yovel. So what happened by Yovel? So he said by Yovel, the Yarishas Ishto, he said that's one of the times Shein Chayzun B'Yovel, that it doesn't go back, but rather that the husband gets to keep it. Now, why would that be? Obviously, that's a good thing. So because of that, Shavu Rabbanan Ki Yarish, we consider him like a Yarish, and therefore it's not Chayzun B'Yovel. Mishum Seder Didei, because he's going to lose the land otherwise. Gabed Rav Yosef Rav Chanina, when it comes to the din of Rav Yosef Rav Chanina, Shavu Rabbanan Kol Keach. So what was Rav Yosef Rav Chanina? That was the case of Usha. In the case of Usha, we consider him like a Keach, and therefore that's why Mishum Seder Didei, because he would otherwise lose it, because his wife sold the Nichsim Olug, and after she dies, if he's not like a Lekech, he won't get the land back. So therefore, sometimes we consider him like a Yerush, sometimes we consider him like a Lekech, whatever's in his benefit. Gabi Deravin Mishum Seder D'Almana Shavu Rabbanan Ki Yerush. When it comes to how come the Almana keeps getting paid from the son-in-law, it's because of the loss of the Almana, we consider him like a Yerush. So in other words, therefore he still has the obligation to support her, because we want to make sure that this woman is taken care of. But the case of Rav Yosef Rav Chanina by Usha, so we're doing something better for the husband, but how about the loss of the buyers? Those lukuchos, they knew what they're getting themselves into by buying from this woman the Nechsim Olug. Since there was a husband in the picture, he shouldn't have been so quick to buy this, knowing that there was this possibility the husband would take it back. So therefore, it was kind of like their doing. Says the Rashbam, how about that case that we said before of a person who has a debt and then gets married? So Mistabrik to Kiyarishavi. So the Rabbi Chananel says, in that case, the husband is like a Yarish. Mishum Seder de Malva, because it's a loss of the Malva, and therefore we actually would require him to pay it back. Whenever there's a loss, so therefore again we see whenever there's this loss, therefore we'll consider the person like a Yarish. So therefore, in the case that we originally established, Rabbi Chananel, even though the Gemara doesn't really directly address this question, the answer to this question, we consider him like a Yarish, and therefore can be goiva in a Yarsh, and you can collect the debt from the husbands. Okay, let's see all the questions that pertain to here. We're going to just stop at the end of this parak. So let's see. So the question is as follows. Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. Okay, one question here. Baal Menichse Ishto Maskana Imo Keachavi or Yorishavi. And the answer is, it depends, right? So, the Tavale Avdule, this is all they want you to write. Do whatever is best. Pamim Kolekech, Pamim Kiyarish. It depends on whatever is in best in that situation. Sometimes like a Yarish, sometimes like a Loikech. Okay, so it all depends on whatever's best for the husband. Okay, let me just put this test back for the next test, which is Kuf Lamed Vav is where we're going to start. And let's see a couple more questions. TA 3. Haniach bonim gedom katanim ingadom misparis malade katanim hech misashev ama kaimon gadol achi the lavash. Okay, this was a softball question. Those are always nice. How could it be that we have this case where the son is able to spend money on beautiful clothing? So how do we understand that? So masnisin is b'shircha. As we said, that when it comes to a child who actually has obligations to need to look good, so therefore that is an exception. So he says, Hacha Ayri b'sharcha, Adam batal shin lehem revach b'davar. Okay, question TB5. Shalchle loves to be achav v'amni says Bava kecha v'mava milva pen of gaiva melkuchos a yarish have gaiva kayarshima maskana milsa be Indian zet umadua. Rashbam. That is a hard question, but luckily we saw this question in the Rashbam, or at least in, he quotes the Rabbeinu Hananel, but obviously an essential question, a great question. This is what I wrote. Habal palmim kiyarish katanas usha im usha machar sakarka palmim koikech shimishas hayovel karka inu chayzer. Matay vo maskan labal palmim kiyarish palmim loikech lafikach hu kiyarish lafikach hacha kiyarish v'goyba. So that's actually just the last line is the only part which is the answer. Okay, the whole answer is this: that we say that he's considered like a yarish, mipnei pseda. So because there was a loss in the matter, so that's the answer. Mishum pseda de malva, the lender would be losing out. So therefore, that is the din. Hanulach yesh noichlin, hanulach yesh noichlin, hanulach yesh noichlin. Finally, finishing the lengthy 8th parak of Bava Batra, we'll be starting Misha Meis V'niach Banim U'Banais tomorrow's daf.